Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our weekly series of shirim on the Torah of today. And as we left off last week, we now have our shoes on. We're now prepared with the protection of self to enter into the outside of our lives. Now, the house demands far more attention. Being in the house, having a table, having a bed, having chairs, having a lamp, what a window means, what a staircase means, what corners are, what ceilings are, what light fixtures are, what a garbage can is, what the kitchen is, all of the different moods and the hues of human experience that take shape through our own particular habituated way of being. The being in a dwelling, the dira bitachtoinim, to be in a dira mamish. We're going to spend a lot of time discussing those elements, but we're going to address the house specifically when we return back to the home at the end of the day. Right now, we're not spending time talking about the interiority of the home because in the morning, the work is to get ready to face the day, and that means leaving the inner quality of the home. We're going to discuss the inner quality of the home, but that's going to be in the future shirim of when, after the long-winded nature of being outside, we can return back to the calmness of the inside. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the architectonics and the spiritual shape of human experience when it is mediated and shown through architectural being, that we experience life through spaces, through corners, through banisters, through floors and ceilings and walls and windows and all sorts of different shapes and measures. For now, we're getting ready to leave the house. We're getting ready. Once we have our shoes on, we're exiting. And so that's what I want to speak about today. That after the morning process, after a person has gone through the steady process of tzimtzumim, to be able to align the mind properly to face an outside world with all of the protective devices, with our garments on, which are going to reveal our inner desire externally while still maintaining our inner quality of self, and all of those tzimtzumim and all of those containment elements that we've discussed so much. We are now exiting the inner territory of our homes, and we are exiting to the outside of the world. Now, Hashem has set it up in such a way that we live with Pnimius and Chitzonius. Everything in the Welt, everything in Metzius, everything in existence is split into these two categories, the inside and the outside. Now, beyond the definition of those particular territories, of what it means to be inside and what it means to be outside, we first have to acknowledge the fact that because there's an inside and an outside to everything, so we are creatures who are aware of there being an inside and an outside. Instead of thinking about what it means to be someone who lives on the inside and what it means to be someone who lives on the outside, we have to first grapple with the notion that as human beings, we are aware of the difference between the inside and the outside. And that differentiation between the inside and the outside, even prior to needing to learn the particular parameters of what it means to be a human being inside and what it means to be a human being outside, we first have to acknowledge that a fundamental reality of being human is that we have a split between the inside and the outside. So before defining what those things mean, we live with an awareness of there being an interior and an exterior. The interior, for now, this is what we're going to focus on, is the place of calmness, is a place of unity, is a place of menucha, of calmness. The home is meant to be a place of calmness. The home is meant to be that place of the habitat where I feel natural and at home. The opposite is not feeling at home. And when I don't feel at home, things are disjointed and things are confusing and things are scattered. The nature of being at home means I don't have to question so much about my habitat, just like I don't have to question so much about my habits because they have a certain element of a life of their own. So too, with regards to the habitat, it has its own preset borders, boundaries, and markers that enable the individual to feel like they are calm and habituated within their habitat. I know where the forks are, I know where the knives are, I know where the towels are, I know where the garbage is, I know where the garbage disposal is, I know where the dairy sink is, the fleshik sink, however a person lives their life in their architectonics of self. The home is a place of familiarity. The home is a place where everybody theoretically will know a person's name. Now, these are ideals, obviously, but there's an inner shalom, there's a shalom bias, there's a calmness at home, there's a unity at home, which shows how all separation and all differentiation and all fragmentation are ultimately unified. That's the calmness of the inside. And on a spiritual sense, being on the inside means that I have my thoughts secured away. I have my compartments of coping. I know my coping mechanisms for the day. I know the expected frustrations that I'm going to encounter during the day. And I also know the expected wins that I'm going to have. And I'm not allowing myself to get too caught up with being taken by one or the other. There's a certain sense of expectancy, of knowledge, of I know how things are in the home. That's the insideness. To be something panimi, to have panemius means to live with a certain calmness of allowing myself to have my defenses down. Not my defenses down to the degree that it's without any limitation, but the limitations and the levushim in the house are very different than the levushim outside the house. Nowadays, people walk out in slippers, but slippers, calmness, being present at home, those are the garments of the house. But when we go outside, when we exit the house, after preparing ourselves for the day, getting dressed, putting on our shoes, being aware of what the issues might be, and preparing ourselves for a day of being human, we are now exiting the home and going outside. The chitzonius, the externalities of the world, are very different than the internalities of the world. And no matter how much we try and domesticate the outside and allow it to become familiar like the inside, by dint of the fact that we're human and that Hashem wants there to be a separation between the inside and the outside, so the outside will never feel quite like the inside, just as the inside won't ever feel quite like the outside. And so, no matter how domesticated it is and how known our outside territory of life is and where we're going to go throughout the day and what we're going to do, nevertheless, the outside is a place of chance. The outside is a place of collision. The outside is a place of war. It's a place of the collision between two separate entities which are not taking the other into consideration. And as a result of that, there is a collision that now needs to be settled. And little bonfires everywhere. For every other person is a world, and every world is built upon its simsum and its own definition. And so when I come out of my own inner world where nobody else is there other than my immediate family, and I exit into the world of other people, into the public domain, into Rishus Harabim, so now I am on a collision course to encounter resistance and fragility anywhere I look. I'm not in control on the outside. I do not determine the temperature on the outside. I don't determine the behaviors of other people, and I don't determine the outcome of circumstances. And in spite of the fact that that's also true on the inside of our house, nevertheless, the insideness of reality is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us to live with a certain sense of calmness and a menucha muchletas. A menucha muchletas, a pure calmness that's rooted in the true nature of the house, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the makom shel olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Beis HaMikdash, that place of truly being at home. Until then, our homes are mikdashei ma'at. They mimic the calmness. But nevertheless, in spite of the chaos that we might be aware of in our own homes, there's a calmness. But the outside of the world is more of a treacherous place. It's a difficult place. Sometimes it can be a beautiful place, sometimes it can be a frightening place, but the mere fact that it can shift from one thing to the other is indicative of the very nature of the outside, which is that it changes. It shifts. Different colors, different hues of experience. The Heichal Hagvanim Hamishtanim, the chamber of changing colors. The outside of the world, Olam Hazeh. And so we're now making our transition. We're going away from that inner quality of calmness where I get to regulate the temperature and the volume and the tempo of my inner state of being, and I get to converse with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on my terms. I am now getting ready to exit Rishus HaYachid and go into Rishus Harabim, to go into the outside world, to shift from that individualized experience and expose myself once again to the reality that there are many, 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 many people in the world. And just as there are many different people with different faces, as many different faces that there are going to be differences of opinion. And there's a place of machlokas, as Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Nachman describe everywhere. The nature of reality is machlokas. It's not that there's reality on the outside and then machlokas erupts and collision erupts. The very nature of the outside is collision itself. It is machlokas. Machlokas is what creates the outside of the world. It's the territory of warring opinions and differentiation of outlook that create the terrain and the various furrows and the shifts and the changes that create externalized reality. And so when we leave our homes, what we're doing is we're entering into a world of pain, pain of misunderstanding, pain of loss, pain of expectation that doesn't necessarily get satisfied. Now, it's also going to be a world of possible joy, and there's going to be immense amount of accomplishment that can be uncovered in the outside. And the goal is to domesticate the outside and to transform it into a dir b'tachtonim. But before we get there, we have to understand that to be outside, and in Tanakh, outside meant the wilderness. Outside meant the forest at nighttime. Outside meant to be exposed to the extremities of life, to be exposed to the oilam kiminhago noheg, that seemingly machine-like process in which reality just moves and it seems to have a semblance of its own, God forbid, without divine vitality. That statement of Chazal of olam kiminhago noheg. My Saba, Rav Yisrael, when he was describing his experiences in Auschwitz and describing his real exposure to the outside of the outside, the way that he would always describe it is the way that Chazal would use this lashon of olam kiminhago noheg, that the world operates the way that it operates, which is a profound way of Chazal describing teva, the externalization of this world, the apparent concealment of godliness. And in Ishbitz and Radzin, they use this as a quality of what it means to face the outside of the world. Ishbitz and Radzin, that tzaddikim who teach us how to maintain a mindfulness and a space of calmness on the outside of the world, in the outside of the world, and to be connected in that place, and to find light in that place. The tzaddikim of Ishbitz and Radzin, they look at this quality of being outside, and oilam kimen noeg, and they say that we see that a person can steal grain and they can plant grain, and nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to allow that grain to grow. And what we see from here is that seemingly it appears on the outside of things that at least din v'leis dayan, there's no judge and there's no judgment, God forbid. And theoretically, the rules of fairness would dictate that someone who does the wrong thing wouldn't be matzliach, but the outside of the world doesn't go that way. And so the outsideness is the exposure to the vulnerability that we experience. And it's also the exposure to the desires of other people and the collision with all of the overwhelmingness that we find when we're destabilized by being exposed to other things. So what we have to try and learn is, how do we transition? How do we go from the inside to the outside? Now, there are a few pitfalls. There are a few themes that we have to protect ourselves of as we enter into the public domain of daily experience. And for now, we're going to describe them as three different elements. Number one, there's the fact that we feel that Hashem is not going to be present in the outside. That, God forbid, Hashem was mitzamtzim himself in a real way, in accordance with the externalized nature of this worldliness, we might feel that Hashem is not found in the outside of the world. And if Hashem is not found in the outside of the world, or Hashem is not revealed in the outside of the world, so then the externalized territory of the world becomes a very, very frightening place. If a person steps out of their doorway for a second without being aware that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fills all worlds and surrounds all worlds and is as present in the outside as he is on the inside, then a person has already fallen into the trap of Rishus Harabim, and we get swallowed up by the cacophony of voices and warring desires. So the first issue that we run into when we expose ourselves to the extremities of the world and the outside of the world and the warring opinion and the apparent disunity at the heart of all things, the first thing that we have to struggle with and we have to grapple with and we have to remember is that Hashem is one and Hashem is ever present. And that all of these shifts and all of these changes are ultimately rooted in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity. We have to affirm God's unity before we exit our house. If we forget about the unity of God, then we forget about all of the cohesiveness of experience. So that's the first threat. We have to remember Hashem's existence. We have to remember that there is a thread of connectivity that unifies the entire process, and that there's meaning underneath the apparent meaninglessness of the outside. And so the first struggle that the person encounters when they leave that calmness of their mind, the Rishus HaYachid of their laboratory-like experiences and their seichel of where Hashem is found, and then suddenly I'm exposed to a different type of reality, and suddenly I forget about Hashem, so I'm going to be swallowed up. So the first thing that I have to do is to fight that natural growing sense of heresy or fear of the absence of God as I enter into the outside, and I have to reaffirm the presence of God. So that's the first issue, that we come to forget about believing in Hashem. The second issue is with regards to the person and themselves, that I am going to forget about my capacity to face the outside world with grace. A person who doesn't have a proper sense of self of themselves, and our tzaddikim told us, Rav Hutner said that this is going to be the ikar nisayon of the last generation, is going to be a kfira in our self-worth. We're going to be heretics when it comes to the potency of our neshamos. We're going to forget how powerful we truly are by the power vested in us and the shorish of our neshama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has taken and drawn down from the most purified place imaginable. And as Rabbi Nachman said, that the most pathetic thing in the world, the ikar harachmanus, the thing that deserves the most pity, is when a Jewish person forgets about where their soul comes from, and we fall into smallness. So aside from forgetting about HaKadosh Baruch Hu as we enter into the outside, we also have to worry about forgetting about ourselves. That as a result of putting on the levushim and the garments and my shoes, it could be that I forget about that inner quality of self that was revealed when I said Moda'ani before washing Netilas Yadayim, and I could come to doubt my capacity to face the world. I could come to doubt my capacity to uncover the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wherever I go. And in response to that, we have to have a deepening of a belief in ourselves. Those are the first two issues. One is forgetting about Hashem as we enter into the outside of the world. And that needs to be fought against with a reaffirmation of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to be aware of the fact that we're going to lose hope in ourselves and forget about the belief that we have to have in ourselves. And therefore, we have to rehabilitate that with leaning very deeply in to the awareness of our greatness. And number three is that as a result of leaving the inner territory of our homes, we come to forget about the fleetingness and the transiency of what it means to be a human being in this world. That because the outside is marked by this nature of conquest and accomplishment and this capitalistic drive to extend my presence over more and more territory and to be kona things outside of me in the world of the marketplace and the worlds of other people, where I'm forced to hold on to my individual opinions and really stand for certain elements that I believe in. So when a person begins to lean into their own most sedimented identity and their opinions and the things that are right and what they're wrong about and their identity politics and all of these different things, because the outside of the world is a place that can be so threatening, we feel like we have to protect ourselves by protecting ourselves in this lavush of identity and being so stuck in the things that make us who we are and the belief systems that make us who we are and the things that we like and that we dislike. We run the risk of that congealing to such a thick level that we become baligaiva. That we become baligaiva and we begin to lean into our identity and into our jobs and into the things that we do and into the ground that we conquer and into the buildings that we build and into the territory that becomes ours. And we forget about the truth of the matter, which is that Toila Eretz al Blima, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has built the world upon nothingness. And that in truth, this world is floating in the air, and in truth, it's a migdal hapareach ba'avir. And that even though we feel that we can lean deeply into this world and make a mark on experience and existence and other people, in the end of the day, we have to protect ourselves against thickening too much into that identity and remembering the transiency of all things. Now, this transiency of all things is not to become this existential moan that says, oh my God, the world is fleeting, the world is fleeting. Adarabba, the world is fleeting, but all that does for us is forces us to lean deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the moment itself, into right here, right now. Into right here, right now. And so these three pitfalls that we run the risk of encountering as we exit our home, again, are as follows. Number one is when we leave the security of the inside of our minds and the inside of our homes and those comfort places, and we expose ourselves to a territory of differentiation and concealment and darkness and an olam hafuch on the outside, we run the risk of forgetting about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, because that's the territory of the tzimtzum. We run the risk of forgetting about our own capacity and the depth and strength of our neshama, because there's so many issues on the outside and there's so many things that can make me feel insignificant about myself. I forget about my own strength. And we have to fight against that tendency of taking this world too seriously and leaning too far into the things in this world and making them permanent when in truth they're truly transcendent. And so in order to protect us from these three elements, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done is he has ensured for us that we will never go outside without a momentary pause to prepare ourselves. And that's what I want to speak about today. Leaving our home means that we are going to transition through a threshold, through a doorway, from one room to the next. And that threshold, that doorway, that separates the inside and the outside, that Pesach HaBayis, those gates in which I exit and I enter into those two various territories of my life, the inside and the outside. When I leave from the inside towards the outside, or when I return from the outside towards the inside, it's always through the Pesach. It's always through the opening, the doorway, the opening. And this area of the opening is different than the territory of the inside or the outside. Like we said, one of the most fundamental things that we have to acknowledge as human beings is that as creatures, we live split between an inside and an outside, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the world to be revealed in such a way. And that the mark of our consciousness is ultimately emergent through the first separation between inside our mothers and outside of our mothers. Inside the womb and outside the womb. That's as Chazal described, the shift that takes place at the moment of birth. That which was open is closed, and that which is closed was opened. Meaning it's all about the shift and the entrance from one territory into the next. But because there's going to be two territories, what that means is that there's always going to be a third category that rests in the middle, which has a relationship with both sides. There can never be two without a fine line of connectivity that unifies the two things that appear to be opposite one another. That mesach, that barrier that seems to separate one level from the other, is in truth the connective bond that enables these two levels to separate and splinter themselves from each other while still maintaining a semblance of unity. This liminal territory, this transitional space that belongs to the inside and to the outside, that belongs above and belongs below. It's the memutza hamechaber, this intermediary level, which is the lowest rung of the previous level and the highest rung of the next level. This transitionary space, this transitional potential space, the threshold, the liminality that belongs to the inside and the outside, that represents a passage from one stage to the other, that will always be there to meet us prior to exiting and entering. And it's this threshold, it's this Pesach HaBayis, it's this doorway prior to exiting the inside and entering into the outside, is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has ensured that we are going to need to pause to remember. It's the place of memory, to move through that threshold, that in-between territory, that halal shel rishus, where it's not yet determined what valence it has. Is it the inside or is it the outside? And in truth, its undeterminate nature and indeterminate nature is rooted in the fact that it's both and at the very same time. Like any kav ha'emsai, like any secret middle path, which is higher than the right or the left because it contains the right and the left together. It's the secret of das. And that even though the connectivity of das very often appears to be lower than the inside and the outside, in truth, it's higher than the inside and the outside because it has the capacity of unifying them. That the threshold, the doorway, even though it seems insignificant both to the inside, it seems like this incidental ending to the inside where I now exit and I'm in the outside. And by the outside, it's not part of the outside, it's an incidental part of the inside through which I enter. Even though it seems so insignificant, nevertheless, it really represents the most fundamental territory. It's the Pesach HaBayis. It's the bond that holds it together. It's the rug that ties the room together. It connects the inside and the outside. And so what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done is he has commanded us to pause in that place. And the way that we pause in that place is by contemplating the Mezuza. The Mezuza affixed on the right side of our rooms, of our homes, the transitional marker that really represents the first emergence of Nishmas Yisrael as B'ni Bechori, as my true firstborn by Makas Mitzrayim, by Makas Bechoros, where it was the mark on the threshold of the house which differentiated the Jewish people from the Mitzrim, to the degree that we can say that consciousness of being a Jew is born out of the way that we grapple with that threshold, that liminal territory of the mezuzah. Because the mezuzah is this item, is a mitzvah, is a commandment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us that enables us to, and again, this is not the reason for the mitzvah. We're not darshaning the reason of the mitzvah. This is just from the tzaddikim and their explanation of the mitzvah. It's a tam shebedavar. It's a taste of something, but not the main siba. We don't know anything. But the mezuzah is this pause. It's this reorientation that I have to realize, okay, I am transitioning from the inside to the outside right now. I am undergoing a shift. Something is changing. And as a result of becoming aware of the fact that things are changing, I can now become aware of the fact that just as I function one way in this place, I also have to be able to change and function a different way in the other place. The mezuzah is the awakening to the necessity of shifts and changes and to be fluid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To be fluid and to be able to respond on the fly with Yishuv Hadas, and not to be overwhelmed by the various shifts and changes that take shape between the inside and the outside. And so this mezuzah represents general qualities, and then we're going to see how the mezuzah is also going to answer for us those three points of conscious awareness that we have to hold as we transition from the inside to the outside. Chazal tell us that the mezuzah marks this liminal territory, and it represents two major elements that we're exposed to as we leave the inside of our homes, which are capital, money, the need to make a living, the need to possess, the need to acquire, the need to earn one's keep, the need to feed one's family, the need to be a human being in this world, to live a world of derech eretz, the way of the land. That's the first thing. That's why mezuzah is the same language as azuz, which is the nature of money, which is always moving here and there. Because typically when a person leaves their home, it's for the purpose of going out and earning one's keep and going out into the territory of the outside in order to make their parnasa, which is far more than just economic stability, but rather the comfort of the mind and the territory of bitachon and hishtadlus, and understanding the very delicate balance between enoughness and taivas mammon and an endless desire and craving for more and more capital, which is ultimately an endless desire for more and more power. That's one issue that the person is going to encounter as we exit the threshold of our homes. And the next is that we're exposed to death. We're exposed to concealment. We're exposed to things falling apart. We're exposed to the suffering of other people. And the exposure to the suffering of other people regarding the suffering of others is a very difficult thing, because what it does, even to the self itself, without even focusing on doing for the other, but it exposes the individual to the fact that, wow, life happens. Life happens. And that there's circumstances beyond everybody's control, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu fears the Welt. And the only way to become aware of that in an acute way is to see it by other people and to become aware of that. So being on the outside puts a person into a split path of, on the one hand, I need to acquire, I need to earn, I need to make, I need to possess. And that creates a disbalance in terms of what other people are, because if I need to be a person who's earning, then the other person's earning is going to detract from mine, and it creates a whole element of machlokas. So the mezuzah reorients us to what it means to go outside and try and earn our keep, what it means to try and earn our peace in this world. And number two, it brings us into an encounter of how to face the reality of darkness and concealment in the world. That's why it's zaz maves. The mezuzah is something that dispels the notion of death. It's a protective device. It's something that is meant to calm the soul as it exits that threshold of the inside towards the outside, where it's going to be exposed to all new forms of fears and anxieties. And so these two general qualities, which are ultimately rooted in one thing, because the attempt to make money and parnasa and to earn one's keep and to have more kinyanim than one actually needs, is also a desire to beat death. That if I can't survive death, then at least I can have something that will remain after me. And as we know, nothing remains after, other than the Maisim Tovim and the engravings of our alignment in this world. And so the encounter with capital and the encounter with death are fundamentally tied up with one another, that as I'm leaving the threshold of my home, I'm exposed to these two big questions of, what do I do to make enough for myself today? What do I do to ensure that there's enough for me today, that I'm able to get what I need? And at the same point, how do I protect myself against death? How do I protect against all of the circumstances that are affecting others? And if a person runs out of their home without these two items tended to, so then we're going to fall into taivas mammon. We're going to fall into this nature of kill or be killed, where it's a survival of the fittest, where I take from them because otherwise they take from me. And it becomes a terrible way of experiencing life. It becomes where every other person is just a mania blocking me from what I need for myself. And it turns people into objects that need to be overcome rather than subjects which need to be joined. And so if I run out with Taivas Mammon and I don't have the proper orientation of what Zuzim are and what money is and what comfort is and what sustainability is, then I'm going to be like a drunken individual who's trying to gobble up more and more. And so the Mezuza reminds us that when we look at the threshold, as we exit the inside and move towards the outside, the Mezuza reminds us of sipuk, of enoughness, of ashirus. Ashirus, Rabbi Nachman explains how the Mezuza is the place of ashirus, the place of true wealth. It's the capacity to build a home out of wealth. But wealth is ezehu ashir hasamech bechelko. That the true secret of wealth, the true secret of enoughness, the true secret of sipuk, of histapkus, of being satisfied with what I have in all elements. There's not only the monetary gains, there's the spiritual gains. We see them all through a commodified form of this capitalistic perspective. And the only way to break free from that, from this notion of zuzim, zuz means everything is moving. So whatever I have, I need to go from one place to the next to gain more and more and more. I have to diversify my portfolio in the hopes that enough of the various different things are going to make me feel good enough about myself. And that throws a person into a world of chaos. And what a person has to think about when they look at the mezuzah before they exit the threshold of their inside world towards the outside world and the domain of multiplicity is that I have to remember Ezehu Ashir Hasamech Bechelko. The mezuzah reminds me that the money is there, the capital is there, the gains are there, the process is there, the earning is there, so as to enable a calm enough experience of Ashirus Shebedas, of a wealth within the mind. A wealth in the mind is a perspective of enoughness. That I don't need to go out and take all of it. I just need enough for myself. I just need enough. That's my responsibility. And that demands of a person to decide for themselves, what are my responsibilities today? What are the things that I'm going to be doing on the outside? How am I going to be earning my keep? What are the ways in which I'm going to be revealing my heshtadlus? And where are the boundaries of my bitachon? The mezuzah forces us to think about that, to reconsider the nature of zuzim, and to not be moved around so much by the taiva and the daiga that comes about by parnasa and money, and rather to be the stability, to be that stabilizing element that says, the mezuzah reminds me that if I allow myself to be taken with the perpetual, never-ending flow of money moving from one hand to the next, and commodities moving from one hand to the next, then I'm never going to be calm. I'm going to be taken here, there, wherever the zuzim go. They come from a language of moving. But the mezuzah, which is the fixedness and the sturdiness of the ashiris shebedas, the enoughness, the perspective of ezehu ashir hasameach bechelko, that I have what I need, and I need what I have. So that has to be a reorientation that a person has as they're going into their day. The next is confronting that nature of death. That the mezuzah is there to protect. The mezuzah is there to allow us to remember hashkacha pratis, that zaz maves, that shomer dotzas Yisrael, as we're going to see. The mezuzah protects the doorways of Klal Yisrael. The mezuzah is there to differentiate between the Bechor of Mitzrayim and the Bechor of Bnei Yisrael. The mezuzah highlights the hashkacha pratis, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is looking at each and every person and looking at their lives in a hyper-specific way. In a hyper-specific way, in each and everything that happens in a person's life, in each and every narrative structure that takes shape, that causes a person to be afraid. Because fear is ultimately rooted in transiency. Fear is ultimately rooted in the fact that as human beings, we live with a certain element of death awareness. There's no other creature that lives with the acuity and the acute nature of death awareness that we live with, and the transient nature. And it's in this place that the mezuzah says, Zaz mavis. It pushes mavis away, and it allows me to live in this moment. As I am exiting the threshold of my household, I have to remember that all I have is today. All I have is today. And with that, it's Zaz mavis. Mavis leaves, because the question of death is only a question of tomorrow. But with regards to today, I'm here right now. Like Chazal tell us that the Talmidim came to Rav Yitzchak and they said, how do we do tshuva? And he said, simple, do tshuva one day before you die. And they said, but how do we know when we're going to die? He says, okay, that's the question. But hayomim b'kolo tishma'u, today. Ki aza kamaves ahava, love is as strong as death. It's only by way of becoming aware of the fear of death, which makes me become aware of the fact that all I have control over is right here, right now, and today. Then I can lean in and find the ahava shebiyamim, and I could connect it today with a full-on intensity of the fact that I'm born in the morning, I hit my midlife crisis around lunchtime. When I place my head on the pillow again at nighttime, it's as if I've died for the day. And that Hayomim B'Kolu Tishmo and the Kad Sha'os and the 24-hour territory of our lives of today is all that exists. And in truth, nothing exists other than that. And so the mezuzah has to remind me of that. And when I lean into that mezuzah and I look at that mezuzah and I remember that I have today. I have today. I'm exiting this threshold today, and Be'ezras Hashem, I'll return through this threshold at the end of the day. So it frees a person from contemplating what's going to happen next, and it frees a person from living with that death anxiety and that anticipatory dread over the eventual breakdown of things, and allows a person to be present in today. So the mezuzah, first and foremost, helps us reorient zuzim, our orientation to capital gains, and the secret of being able to cultivate a perspective of enoughness in terms of our quest for possession. As Rav Dessler says, that the true mark of an individual is found behis bodeduto, when they make themselves enter into a place of solitude of the mind. Kishuhu notein velo notel, when we give rather than take. Kishuhu shoef lihiyot velo lahasigu liknot, and when we yearn to be rather than to acquire and possess. That for Rav Dessler, the real orientation to being a human being was jumping out of that capitalistic kind of rat race and seeing it from a perspective of Ashira Shabadas. And then also Zaz Maves, pushing death away, pushing the fear of death away, of being able to lean into today and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chadashim lebekarim rabba u'mnasecha, you gave me today. Tein li atayom hazeh, give me today. Let me see, Olemecha tira b'chayecha, let me elongate my day. Let me not be afraid of that impending death, that all human beings live with that consciousness. But rather let me live with life. Let me find Kate's Chai, that when I realize there's a Kate's to everything, that's when I truly come alive in the day. And so those are the first two meditative techniques that a person can have as they're crossing the threshold of their door. And this is able to be done in any time a person goes through one room to the next, to remind ourselves ever so gently over and over as to these qualities of self. And then we can go into those three technical fears that we have to bring to mind as we move out of the inside and go towards the outside, forgetting about Hashem. So the outside is the tzimtzum. Rabbi Nachman says the inside is the seichel. It's where we're aware of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. But the outside is the tzimtzum, where we're no longer aware of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. The mezuzah, the threshold, is the in-between. The mezuzah is what reminds us of the Shem Shakai. There's a name of God that's inscribed upon the mezuzah. That shin reminds us of something, and it reminds us of Hashem's name, which is Shin Daled Yud. What Shin Daled Yud means, it comes from a language of dai, it comes from a language of enoughness. And when Chazal want to give us an understanding of what this name represents, it means that when Hashem created the world, when the infinite light was ever extending itself, it extended without limit. It was mispashet beli gvul, without any limitation whatsoever. That it extended and it extended and it extended. And as we know, something that is pure extension without limitation is non-existent. It's just a flow. The endless watery flow without limitation does not give us the ability to do anything. It's the limit point. It's the outside, the tzimtzum, that actually enables us to pivot and to create experienceable moments where I can attach myself to existence as a mind that's trying to experience Hashem in this world. And so the same Shakai, the name of God, Shin Daled Yud, Chazal tell us that Hashem saw that his world was extending, and he was ga'arbo, he yelled at it, so to say, and he said, it's enough, stop extending. Shamar daila olamo. He said, it's enough, you don't have to extend anymore, world, the world is enough. And so as we're crossing over the threshold of the inside and the outside, and we're looking at that mezuzah, when we think about the shin of the mezuzah, we think about the Shem Shakai, Shin Daled Yud, and to visualize that name for but a moment. The Shin Daled Yud, those three letters, and to realize that Hashem said to the world, it's enough. Hashem was mitzamsim himself in the world. And there's enough in that tzimtzum. Hashem didn't let the tzimtzum get more than it should. The tzimtzum is exactly as Hashem wants it to be. The midos, the levels of concealment, the yisurin, the hastaros, shabatoch hastara, the kelim, mekelim shonim, the pockets of darkness that a person is going to encounter in the day, that is the shape of the tzimtzum. And it's exactly as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the tzimtzum to be. Every element of tzimtzum that's going to take shape is exactly as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants his presence to be concealed for the individual in that day. It's not more and it's not less. It's exactly as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it to be. There's no mikra when it comes to the tzimtzum. We have to have this fundamental awareness of the fact that Hashem, any concealment that I'm going to see outside of me today, you're still there. You're still there. I have to look at the mezuzah, think about Shakai, and remember that Hashem, you're the one in control of the tzimtzum. The world is not operating on its own. The world is not a helpless thing. The world is not a chaotic thing. The world is not something that has a life of its own, God forbid. Nothing has a life of its own. Everything is rooted in the fundamental vitality that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is breathing into existence at every moment, from the most microscopic to the most macrocosmic level. That everything is run by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Shefa Tmidis and the Atzmus HaMispashet Lamata Lamata, from the Rosh HaKav down below, from the Orient Sof Kodem Tzimtzum all the way down, everything. Bali Yotzim and Aklal is nichlal within the generalized unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Soiviv Kalamin, Memalet Kalamin, Umi Baladecha Ein Shemetzias Klal, Leitz Aser Panamine, Kuma Kaima Kiloi Chashive. And when we look at the mezuzah and we remember Shakai, what we're doing is we're affirming Hashem, any element of concealment that I'm going to feel from you today, you're there. I know you're there. Because I paused by the mezuzah to remind myself of that. I paused by the mezuzah to remind myself that Hashem, Achen ata kel mustatir, but you are in tzimtzum. You were mitzamsem yourself, and the tzimtzum is you. The tzimtzum, your name, your levush, your externalization is you. And when I'm touching the constriction of your essence, I'm touching the essence itself, so to say. And that meditation has to take place every time I cross the threshold of the door. Every time I see the mezuzah, I have to think, Shaddai, Sha'amr la'olam odai. Hashem said enough, meaning to say the limitations and the containment are directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that there's a hashkacha pratis miyuchedes to each and every experience that a yid goes through in this world. And to live with a bitachon shel simcha and a tikva shel simcha and a hope rooted in joy is to live with hashkacha pratis of choik hatov lahetiv. That choik, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sama choik, he made a limitation in order to reveal the toiv lahetiv, in order to reveal that goodness. So the first thing I have to say when I look at the name Shakai is to remember that Hashem, you're everywhere revealed. And as I exit the inner threshold of the calmness of finding Hashem in my comfortable places of Emunah, and I begin to enter into that frightening territory of Kfira and the heretical outside of the world, I have to remember Sha'amar la'olam odai. That's the first thing. That is the pause that we need in order to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to remember that everything is unified. That's why the mezuzah holds the secret of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu in them. They represent the deepest possible revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity that you're found in the tzimtzum as well. Inside is the seichel, outside is the tzimtzum, as Rabbi Nachman says, and Rabbi Nosson explains, that to unify the seichel with the tzimtzum is the greatest yichud that a person can ever possibly do. So the mezuzah enables us to pause and say, Hashem, even though I'm leaving the place of seichel, which is your revelation, and going into a place of tzimtzum, which is your concealment, the mezuzah reminds me, Shakai, that Sha'amr la'olam odai, that you did this, that you made this containment, the tzimtzum is you, nothing is random, and then I can draw the seichel into the tzimtzumim, and I can be mamtik all of the yisurim, and I can build a real house for myself in this world. That's the first thing that the mezuzah does for a person. We remember Hashem. And that's aligned with the Shita in Chazal that says that Shakai on the mezuzah represents Sha'amr la'olam odai, that Hashem said enough to his world. The next understanding that Chazal have with regards to the Shem Shakai addresses the second issue. The second issue, he says, was not only do we come to forget about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we come to deny HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we come to deny ourselves, we come to deny our strength. As the Heiliger of Tzaddik HaKohen Melublin says in the Tzidkas HaTzaddik that our generation lives with, that just as one must believe in God, so too one must believe in themselves. That just as I have to remember God is everywhere, so too I have to remember that my soul is capable of revealing that God is everywhere. And so the mezuzah helps us with the issue of forgetting about Hashem, because I remember Sha'amr la'olam odai, every ounce of limitation that I'm about to encounter is another expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, another expression of the tzimtzum, and every element of the tzimtzum is just a kli to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within the tzimtzum. That answers up the question of how to remember our amunah in Hashem. But it also reminds us of how to believe in ourselves, because Chazal tell us another explanation for Shakai, which is Sheyesh dai be'elukusa l'chol bria v'bria. There's enough godliness for each and every person. That each and every person is enough, and each and every person's life circumstances are enough, and each and every person's mind is enough, and each and every person's heart is enough, and each and every person's body is enough. As Rabbi Yisrael Salanter responded to one of his Talmidim when he said, if only I had that mind and that heart and this body, then I'd be okay. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, no, your mind, your heart, and your body, each and every person in accordance with the kelim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created them with, in the hashkacha pratas yuchades of each and every person being an olam bifnei atzmo, being a whole world unto their own, and the entirety of existence being built only for each and every person individually. In that place, we have to be able to say to ourselves, "Sheyesh dai be'elokuso l'chol bria v'bria." There is enough godliness. There is enough. I'm not losing out if another person has. I'm not losing out if another person wins. I'm not losing out if something my friend experiences goes easier than something that I'm experiencing. I'm not going to lose by experiencing the joy for another person simply because I'm not focusing on myself. There's enough. There's an enoughness. It's not a race. It might appear to be disjointed and a machlokas, but it's not a race because there's no shared destination. Each and every person has their own destination that they're going towards. Each and every person has their own tachlis in the day of how to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And no two people can do the same thing. And just as we need the tzaddikim for a tainus, we need the rishaim for the tainus. And without the chelbana, which is the disgusting smelling spice in the ketoras, then we couldn't bring the ketoras. Each and every person, each and every moment is a fundamental revelation of something that is singularly unique and cannot be revealed in any other way other than this moment and this individual themselves. And when a person leans into that, we come to begin to believe in ourselves. We come to believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a shliach of you today. And while I might doubt my capacity on my own, but I can't doubt the capacity of the one who sends me. Shliach shel adam kamoso. When I walk through the threshold of my door and I remember, sheyesh dai be'elokus l'chol bria v'bria, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to me and gives me my mission for the day, and that is separate and apart from each and every other person's mission. And in that place, a person can learn to be okay with themselves. So much of the lack of being okay with ourselves are the imagined projections and introjections from others and our perspective of how other people view us and how we view other people's perspectives of viewing us. And it invades our mind and it dislodges us from that center and it takes us away from being able to be okay with ourselves, to live with a loach patiyut de kedusha, of really not caring what another person thinks about my own individual experience in this world, so long as it's not affecting them in a negative way. That light and that ideal of being okay with Hashem and knowing that Hashem is okay with me because you're my God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're revealing yourself to me, and it's going to be in accordance to the measure of my own individualized experience. In that place, a person can lean into enoughness to learn that I'm enough. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me my neshama, gave me my mind, gave me my body, gave me my heart. And it's within those vessels that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to reveal himself today. And I have to put on blinders so that I'm not affected by the hatzlacha or the lack of hatzlacha of other people. I can join in other people's joy, I can share in other people's sadness, but I have to maintain that singular path of experience that is rooted fundamentally in the individuality and the singularity of my own most part of self, which is the yechida shabenefesh. I'm enough in that place. And instead of walking out into the outside world with a perspective of scarcity and not being enough and not being able to handle the struggles and not being able to face the difficulties because my perspective of self is rooted in a destructive one, I can face the world with an attitude of I'm okay, not because I'm good enough, but because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made me good enough. I'm not good enough based on my strengths. I'm good enough because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me what I need. And if that's what I have, then clearly it's good enough. If it's this way, then that's the way it's got to be until it's able to be changed through healthy and viable options. And so walking out the threshold of our door with this belief in self, which is saying, I'm enough, answers up that second question of lack of belief in self. That the Mezuza reminds me that Hashem is ever present and that my soul is ever present. Shakai can remind me She'amar Dai Ba'olamo, that Hashem is in the Tzimtzum, and it can remind me She'ish Dai Ba'elokusa L'chol Bria V'Bria. There's enough godliness for each and every person. And so every time I'm crossing the threshold of room to room or from inside to outside, I have to remember, Hashem, you're here in the concealment, and I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm enough. I'm enough. In this moment, I'm enough. And when a person is able to face the world of capital and death and transitions and movement and the outsideness of things, which is the zuzim of Mezuza and the zazmavas of Mezuza, A person can leave their house with a confidence in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, even in the tzimtzumim, as well as a confidence in the self that we have the capacity to face the day. And the third element that the mezuzah is going to help us with is that sense of transiency, is that sense of the fleeting nature of this worldliness. Listen to the language of what Rabbi Nassan says in Likutei Halachos Hilchos Mezuza Daled. And this is the aspect of the mezuzah that we place upon the Pesach of the house, so that we remember Olam Haba. That the purpose of the mezuzah is so that we can remember Olam Haba, that we remember that there's more than this place, that there's more than this place, there's more than this place in this place right now, meaning to say we can draw down Olam Haba into this moment itself. We have to remember that there's more than this world. Not to ever forget Hashem, and not to ever forget the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because in truth, this world is transient, says Rabbi Nassan. And someone who builds a house and a place of security, it's almost as if they're forgetting about the fact that the real world is going to be the next world. And they situate themselves in a permanent sense in this world. It seems that they're forgetting that this world is in truth ha'olam ha'kala v'ha'oiver, that it's going to disintegrate and it's going to be transient in the end of the day. Because certainly if a person spends enough time thinking about Olam Haba and eternity, and they contemplate the speed and the transiency in which this world floats away, like a passing shade or a passing cloud, then there's no madness greater than someone who's trying to concretize their presence in this world deeper and deeper and deeper to make it seem like they're more secure and more secure and more secure. In truth, building a house seems to be a war against the reality of transiency. As Rabbi Nassan says, there were Tanaim who wanted to live in tents for this very reason, of Banalan Beisa Ba'avir Da'alma. But the mezuzah is there to remind us that Hashem, I know things are transient. I know that a person has 120 years in this world. But at the same point, by placing the hand on the mezuzah and kissing the mezuzah and leaning into this remembrance of Alma Da'asi, remembering HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's more in store, there's a moreness that's going to be revealed. It takes a person out of the scarcity of the now. It takes a person out of this fear of losing out. The mezuzah saturates us. It saturates our consciousness with a sense of enoughness. Enoughness of God, enoughness of myself, enoughness of this moment. That's the purpose of the mezuzah. It pushes away the financial insecurities, and it enables a person to do what they need to do. It takes away the perspective of low self-esteem and low self-efficacy and a lack of self-acceptance, because I reaffirm my connection to the unlimited source. It helps me comfort myself in the present moment of this world and this day, right here, right now, without being caught up in the transiency of it. And it forces me to throw myself with more and more resolve. The mezuzah is there to protect us. The mezuzah is there to give us a shape and a frame of mind that's going to enable us to live in this world. That specific transitional space. It's amazing because there's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Aleph, which is the 11 spices of the Keteros. 11 in Avodah Zarah is the place of the most concealment imaginable. And it's the Gemara that discusses Onkelos, and how Onkelos Hager was ultimately the nephew of an emperor, and he decided to convert to Yiddishkeit, who translated the Torah for us. And his uncle, the emperor, kept on sending soldiers to try and convince him to come back. And they would enter into conversation with Onkelos, and Onkelos would have this capacity of overtaking them with reason, and they also would convert to Yiddishkeit. Until his emperor, the uncle, wisened up to the matter, and then he sent more soldiers and ensured that they wouldn't even enter into conversation. He didn't feel it was safe. And even though there was no conversation, Onkelos kissed the mezuzah of the cave, and he said that, you see, the nature of the Jewish God is different than kings. That kings place their guards on the outside and the king lives on the inside. But the Jewish God expresses himself on the outside by the mezuzah and protects us on the inside. And that itself was enough to convert them. What was it about Onkelos Hager and this wisdom of the mezuzah? Like we said, the mezuzah represents that threshold from the inside towards the outside, and it gives us the strength of being able to draw the light of the inside into the outside, to extend that makom of menucha into the outside of the world, to have the belief that Hashem is enough, that I'm enough, and that everything is enough. as a result of drawing the inside out into the outside. And that's done through the mezuzah. That's what Onkelos Hager was. Onkelos was this transitional space, the translational territory, the translational matrixial field that allowed the inner light of the Torah in Lashon HaKodesh to be expressed externally through Lashon Targum. That's the Metzias of Onkelos Hager, as the Arizal says. He represents this transitional territory of translation. That's what the threshold is doing for us. That's what the door, the liminal space of the doorway, is translating the inside to the outside. It's translating my inner experience towards the outside of the world and enabling me to keep my moichin with me. And so we have to develop for ourselves meditative devices that when we look at the mezuzah, when we touch the mezuzah, when we think about shakai, it's meant to give us the strength to exit the inside and enter into the outside and to be able to accomplish today in a reasonable way. From a perspective of enoughness, not from a perspective of a craving for more and more, an endless craving for more and more, from a perspective of godly presence rather than godly absence. Either way, Hashem is concealed, sure, but that doesn't mean absence. That means presence. That's a tzimtzum. And to be okay in this moment rather than chasing against some terror, we can lean into the moment and we can be present with ourselves, with others, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the avodah of the mezuzah, to translate, like Onkelos Hager, this secret that Hashem is found on the outside. Hashem wants us to express ourselves in the dir b'tachtonim, that's the outside of the world. And once we've armed ourselves with the secret of the mezuzah, so we can begin the process of the day-to-day experiences of getting into a car, of going to shul, of going to a job, of going to eat, of encountering other people, of seeing garbage on the floor, of the shifts in the weather, and all of the different things that we're going to be discussing in this series of shirim. The mezuzah is that threshold moment that a person can experience so many times in the day. The mezuzah of the mind is something that we have to carry with ourselves. It's what protects us in exile. And Be'ezras Hashem, if we can learn more and more about the mezuzah, become more and more aware of how to think about the Shem Shakai, how to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then we're going to find more and more calmness in our lives, Be'ezras Hashem.